Hello, and welcome to another video with videos to fall asleep to. In this video, we will cover the history of the Wimbledon. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more videos. Look closely at a blade of perennial ryegrass. It is soft. It is fragile. If you walk on it too much, it bruises, turns brown, and dies. It is entirely unsuited for the violent, explosive, high-friction combat of modern professional athletics. And yet, for 2 weeks every July, the greatest athletes on the planet arrive in a quiet, affluent suburb of southwest London to wage war on it. They are forced to wear all white. They are required to bow to the royal box. And they play in an arena where the silence is so absolute, so suffocating, that you can hear the squeak of a sneaker or the muttering of a frustrated player from the top row of the stands. This is the championships. This is Wimbledon. It is the oldest tennis tournament in the world, but it is more than just a tournament. It is a time machine. It is a stubborn, meticulously orchestrated rejection of the modern world, wrapped in a 140-year-old tradition. To understand Wimbledon, you must understand the English psyche, the profound respect for rules, the quiet resilience, and the sheer, glorious absurdity of its origins. Let us open the gates of SW19. Act 1. The Broken Roller and the Bake Sale. The most prestigious, exclusive, globally recognized sporting event on the planet did not begin with a grand vision. It began because a club was broke and their lawnmower was broken. It was 1877. The All England Croquet Club was struggling. Croquet was going out of fashion, and the club needed £10 to repair a pony-drawn roller used to keep their lawns flat. To raise the money, they decided to host a tournament for a newly invented, rather faddish game called lawn tennis. They charged an entry fee of 1 guinea. 22 men signed up. They drew up a set of rules, deciding the court should be rectangular and the net should be exactly 3 feet high in the center. The tournament was delayed by rain, a tradition that has proudly endured for over a century. But eventually, a local racket sports champion named Spencer Gore won. He took home 12 guineas. The club fixed the roller. They thought it would be a one-off. But the next year, more people wanted to play, and more people wanted to watch. The All England Croquet Club quietly added "and lawn tennis" to its name. By 1882, the tennis had become so overwhelmingly popular that they dropped the word croquet entirely. The tail had wagged the dog. But in those early days, Wimbledon was merely a garden party. The players wore long white flannel trousers and ties. The women wore full-length dresses, corsets, and hats. It was polite. It was slow. You served underarm. You hit the ball delicately. Sweating was considered terribly un-British. It would take a Frenchwoman to blow the doors off the garden party. Act 2. The Diva and the Champagne. The year is 1919. The First World War has ended, and the world is desperate for glamour. Onto center court walks Suzanne Lenglen. Lenglen was not polite. She was a supernova. While the British women were still suffocating in corsets, Lenglen walked out wearing a loose, calf-length pleated skirt, a short-sleeved blouse, and no corset at all. Her arms were bare. The British establishment gasped. But then she started to play. Lenglen moved like a ballerina. She leapt into the air. She smashed the ball with a ferocious, athletic grace that no one had ever seen before. And between sets, she didn't sip barley water. She sat on the umpire's chair, wrapped herself in a fur coat, and sipped cognac from a silver flask. The public lost their minds. She was a diva, a celebrity, a global icon. Lenglen became so wildly popular that the old grounds at Warple Road could no longer hold the thousands of people trying to catch a glimpse of her. People were fainting in the crush. So, in 1922, because of the sheer star power of this one Frenchwoman, the club packed up and moved to its current location on Church Road. They built a massive 14,000-seat cathedral of tennis. Center court. It was no longer a garden party. It was a global theater, and the world was watching. Act 3. The Blitz and the Pig Farm. But theaters can burn. In 1939, the Second World War broke out. The championships were suspended, but Wimbledon did not close its doors. The All England Club was drafted into the war effort. The immaculate grass courts were used to graze farm animals. A small pig farm was set up next to the practice courts. The clubhouse was used by the military for civil defense, medical units, and fire services. And then, on the night of October 11th, 1940, the war came directly to SW-19. During the Blitz, the Luftwaffe dropped 500-pound bombs on the grounds. One of them scored a direct hit on the roof of center court. It tore through the stands, obliterating 1,200 seats and leaving a massive crater in the Cathedral of Tennis. For the rest of the war, the wreckage sat there, a gaping wound in the heart of the club. When the war ended in 1945, the country was devastated. Rationing was in full effect, and London was a pile of rubble. But the British are nothing if not stubborn. In 1946, they decided the tournament must go on. They couldn't afford to rebuild the destroyed section of center court. So, they just cleaned up the debris, roped off the crater, and played anyway. Players from around the world arrived, many of them having survived the horrors of the war. They walked out onto the grass, looked up at the bombed-out roof, and served the ball. It was an act of profound, defiant normalcy. It was a message that civilization and tradition would survive. Act 4. The Open Era and the Bad Boys. Let us fast forward to the 1970s and 1980s. Tennis had entered the open era. Professionalism was finally allowed. The money was massive, the television coverage was in color, and the players were no longer polite amateurs. They were rock stars. And Wimbledon, with its strict all-white dress code, its royal box, and its pristine, quiet grass, became the ultimate stage for rebellion. The speaker paces, injecting a sudden, agitated energy into their voice. Enter John McEnroe. McEnroe was a kid from Queens, New York. He had a mop of curly hair, a wooden racket he treated like a magic wand, and a temper that belonged in a street fight. To McEnroe, the stuffy, quiet, polite atmosphere of Wimbledon was suffocating. When an umpire called his ball out, McEnroe didn't politely query the decision. He exploded. "You cannot be serious!" he screamed at an umpire in 1981. A phrase that is now permanently etched into the cultural lexicon. You are the absolute pits of the world. The British tabloids dubbed him Super Brat. The establishment hated him. They threatened to throw him out of the tournament. But they couldn't, because John McEnroe was a genius on grass. His serve and volley game was a surgical dissection of his opponents. And his greatest rival provided the ultimate contrast. Björn Borg, the Swede. The Iceman. Borg was silent, emotionless, and played from the baseline with heavy topspin. When Borg and McEnroe met in the 1980 Wimbledon final, it was a clash of civilizations. Ice versus fire. Tradition versus rebellion. The 18-minute tiebreaker in the fourth set of that match remains the most dramatic, nerve-shredding passage of play in the history of the sport. Borg won the match, but McEnroe returned the next year and finally dethroned the Ice King. McEnroe proved that you could scream at the gods of Wimbledon, but if you won, they still had to hand you the golden trophy. Act 5. The Grass Specialists and the Uninvited Guest. By the 1990s, the grass at Wimbledon had become terrifyingly fast. Unlike clay or hard courts, grass is slick. When a tennis ball hits grass, it doesn't bounce up. It skids. It stays low. This created the era of the grass specialist. Huge men with massive serves who would blast the ball at 130 miles an hour and instantly charge the net. If you couldn't return the serve, the point was over in 2 seconds. No one mastered this better than Pete Sampras. Pistol Pete. He won 7 Wimbledon titles in 8 years. He was a quiet, relentless machine. But the most magical story of this era didn't belong to a machine. It belonged to a ghost. The year was 2001. Goran Ivanisevic. Goran was a towering, volatile Croatian with a terrifying serve. He had reached the Wimbledon final 3 times in the 1990s and lost all 3 times. It had broken his heart. By 2001, his shoulder was ruined. He was ranked 125th in the world. He wasn't even ranked high enough to qualify for the tournament. But because of his past finals, the All England club took pity on him. They gave him a wild card entry. It was meant to be a polite farewell tour. But Goran started winning. He served like a man possessed. He talked to himself on the court, arguing with his own demons. The British crowd, who love an underdog more than almost anything, adopted him as their own. He rode a wave of pure emotion all the way to the final, which had been delayed to a Monday because of rain. The corporate suits couldn't attend, so the tickets were sold to the general public. Center court turned into a raucous, screaming football stadium. When Goran won the final point against Patrick Rafter, he collapsed onto the grass, weeping uncontrollably. He became the first and only wild card in history to win the men's singles title. He proved that sometimes the ghosts of Wimbledon give you one last chance. Act 6. The Gods and the Queens. As we enter the modern era, the club made a controversial decision. They changed the type of grass. They made it 100% perennial ryegrass. It made the soil harder, the bounce higher, and the game slightly slower. The era of the serve and volley died. The era of the baseline titans began. We must speak of the queens of center court. Martina Navratilova. She didn't just play at Wimbledon, she owned it. She won 9 singles titles. Her athleticism, her aggressive net play, and her sheer, undeniable courage made her the absolute monarch of SW19. And then came the Williams sisters, Venus and Serena. They brought a level of power, speed, and baseline ferocity that the grass had never seen. Between them, they won 14 Wimbledon singles titles. They took the polite, country club history of the tournament and wrote their own magnificent, unapologetic chapter over it. And on the men's side, we witnessed the reign of elegance. Roger Federer. If you want to know what perfection looks like, you watch Roger Federer play tennis on grass. He moved without making a sound. He hit the ball as if he were holding a paintbrush, not a racket. He won a record 8 titles. He made the brutally physical sport look like a choreographed dance. He was challenged, of course, by the relentless baseline warfare of Rafael Nadal and the elastic, unbreakable mind of Novak Djokovic. Their epic finals, stretching into the fading light of the London evening, are the defining moments of 21st century sport. Epilogue. The silence and the soil. So, what is Wimbledon? Look at the other Grand Slams. The US Open is a giant, noisy, neon party in New York. The French Open is a grueling, dust-choked marathon in Paris. The Australian Open is a blistering, sun-baked carnival in Melbourne. But Wimbledon? Wimbledon is a sanctuary. It is the only Grand Slam tournament with no advertising on the courts. Not a single Rolex or Rolex banner on the back walls. Just dark green canvas. The players must wear white, not cream, not off-white. Pure white. A rule so strictly enforced that umpires will inspect the soles of players' shoes before letting them on the court. It sounds ridiculous. It sounds archaic. And it is. But that is the point. When a player steps out onto center court, the noise of the modern world is stripped away. There are no flashing billboards. There are no blaring pop songs at the changeovers. There is only the geometry of the white lines. the perfectly clipped 8mm grass, and the opponent across the net. For 140 years, through world wars, through cultural revolutions, through the invention of the internet and the globalization of sport, this tiny patch of land in southwest London has stubbornly refused to change its soul. It remains a place where for 2 weeks a year, the greatest athletes on earth are forced to submit to the silence. They must bow to the history. They must respect the grass. And when the final point is won,